Hi, I'm Charlie Allison. I have degrees in history, communications, and an MFA in creative writing. I have been studying in one way or another Central Asian history since about 8th grade, and that is going to come in handy for the pronunciation of some of the names that you're going to be exposed to today, because we're going to be talking about Mandukhai Khatun. My Mongolian's terrible, but the rough translation is Mandukhai The Wise Queen of the Northern Yuan dynasty. Welcome to World History with Charlie. We're all familiar with the idea of binary choices. Left or right at the fork, up or down on the elevator, yes or no to a survey. Always, by the way, no to a survey, if you can help it. They're a very helpful metric for understanding problems, but they can be a bit limiting. And it was in one of these limiting situations that Mandukhai of the Northern Yuan found herself. For one thing, she was Mandukhai the Widow at the moment, the previous Khan of the Northern Yuan, her husband having just died. We won't say much about his other wife vanishing under mysterious circumstances because we can't prove anything, but Mandukhai was young, adrift, and plagued by a binary choice. Her first option, as Empress default of the Northern Yuan, was functionally to sell herself to the Ming dynasty of China. A quick recap, the Ming are the people who kicked the Mongol dynasty that ruled China, the Yuan, out after quite some time, and they fled back to Central Asian part of the continent, where Mongolia is now, more or less. And they did not take defeat well. Mongols have never been accused of being particularly good sports. And so they obstinately called themselves the Northern Yuan, the implication with that being that we are the rightful rulers of China, and we will come back and reassert that over your corpses. That never really happened. But it did mean that Mandukhai could, in fact, sell herself to the Ming dynasty. The Ming dynasty had a special fund set aside for disaffected Mongol, which is the term we'll be using for steppe people, because it's convenient, Mongol nobility, right? If you didn't like your life on the steppe, you could always sort of sell yourself to the Ming. They'd keep you in great luxury. You could marry whoever you want. You just wouldn't have freedom of movement, and you'd have no political power. The Ming reckoned, rightly, by the way, it was much cheaper to pull out all the bells and whistles for disaffected nobility than it was to feed, clothe, and supply an army and take it into the steppes to be massacred. So, that is one option. So you could submit to the Ming, be very safe, very happy, and very bored. Our second option is a little bit more complicated. She could marry someone. And this is marriage in self-defense. You marry someone before someone comes and forcibly marries you, if you're Mandukhai. And she has two options in this. Her first option is an up-and-comer from the Oirat tribe, who are a Muslim steppe people off to the west. They have control of the remains of the Silk Road trade route, so they're very wealthy, very cultured, and that would be probably a pretty good match. It would increase her status, but also take away her autonomy, because her husband would be ruling the Yuan-Oirat combined forces, not her. The other option is one of her old political buddies and friends, a Mongol general named Unabolid. By all accounts, a reasonably good guy. He was descended from Ghengis Khan's brother Khazar, which, remember on the steppes, if you have anything from Ghengis Khan's bloodline in your background, that's political gold. That's paver. Fantastic. That's legitimacy out the wazoo. And he had solicited Mandukhai for marriage. Same benefits as marrying the Oirat guy, but problem. Her autonomy and political power probably take a hit too. So this is a pretty bad binary choice to be stuck in. Irrelevance and comfort, or right back to where you were with little autonomy and a lot of duties. Rightfully, Mandukhai decides to take a bit of a third option, subverting the binary choice. Remember how I said that Genghisid blood, being of the bloodline of Genghis Khan, was valuable? Excuse me. It lent legitimacy. Well, because of that, paradoxically, having that was a pretty big target on your back. A generation before Mandukhai was born, there was a giant purge of anyone who claimed to have Genghis Khan's blood in them. The idea being that if they're all dead, they can't claim legitimacy, and we can go back to ruling ourselves. Very fantasy trope. Well, as it happened, there were rumors of one small boy who survived the massacre and escaped to a distant, inhospitable clime. Again, this is fantasy novel stuff. There's a reason why fantasy novels use this sort of framing, because in history, it sometimes happened. This lone survivor of the Genghisid bloodline, so claimed anyway, was named Bayan Monk. And he had grown up in one of the least hospitable places in the world, and even in Mongolia, which is saying something, right? He grew up in the Gobi Desert, looked after by an aging nurse who did not take as good care of him as she could have. The Gobi Desert is not a hospitable place. Not a lot of people vacation there, and there's a good reason for that. Sandstorms, winds that can blow you off your horse, unforgiving heat followed by paralyzing cold at night. It's a nightmare to live in. And as a result, Bayan Monk, when he's discovered by Mandukhai's agents, and rescued, some might say, is badly deformed. He has trouble walking. Malnutrition is almost certainly part of it. There's rumors that he had a bit of a hunchback. And so it takes weeks of what we would now call physical therapy. The Mongols had an old traditional style of medicine that is basically muscle pulling or resetting bones through brute force over a series of weeks or months. And an ancient silver bowl is used, and it's all very shamanistic and apparently effective, because after a couple of weeks of proper food and pushing his spine back into the right shape, Bayan Monk almost looks like a real boy. And this is Mandukhai's meal ticket for political power and temporal legitimacy. Seems like a bit of a long shot, right? Mandukhai the Wise, once Bayan Monk is pushed back into shape, takes him to see the shrine of the first queen and the eternal blue sky. The shrine is a source of legitimacy, much like the shrine to Genghis Khan that also was always moving. A thing to know about steppe cultures is that if there's something, there's a very good chance that it's mobile. Stick some wheels on it or put it on the back of the horse and you're set. So Mandukhai takes Bayan Monk to the shrine of the first queen in the eternal blue sky and calls a Kurultai, which is a Mongol Congress, where all your supporters show up and listen to what you have to say. By showing up, they have said they support you. By not showing up, they have withdrawn their support. And so Mandukhai the Wise basically has to relitigate her decision-making process to her political backers, which are not many at this point. So she stands there while Bayan Monk is sitting on the horse and starts speechifying, like you do. And Mandukhai might have been young and relatively untutored, but she must have had a natural flair for politics, because she goes through point by point explaining why she won't do the thing that seems logical. She says, "Not only will I not sell myself to the Ming, because we hate the Ming, am I right, guys? Yeah, boo, down with those guys. I think too much of our people and would never betray you in that way. Not only will I not marry that up-and-coming Oirat guy, Esmail, and the traditional, yeah, boo, down with that other guy, he's not exactly like us. Fine, you're doing well. I also absolutely will not marry Unaboled, who, even though he is descended from this particular line of Genghis Khan, is just not quite good enough for me." What? Nope. It's not what I'm doing. Not selling out to the Ming, not marrying into the Oirats, not marrying Unabolid. What I am doing is marrying a direct descendant of Genghis Khan, who is just now going to get the blessing of the first queen and the eternal blue sky. And she turns to Bayan Monk, who is 7 and scrawny, and until relatively recently had been living in the Gobi Desert, tragically deformed. Mandukhai the Wise has staked all of her political capital on whether this little boy can A, get off his horse, and B, walk across the terrain to the shrine and do the ritual obeisance without incident. And like many martial cultures at the time, the Mongols esteemed physical strength. To trip here would be a disastrous sign. Bayan Monk inches his way towards the altar, makes it there, to the surprise of very likely everyone, and almost certainly Mandukhai. And it's key to remember that beseeching shrines was not the harmless or risk-free act we would associate with, say, going to a Buddhist temple or going for mass at a church. Plenty of people would love to claim to be descended from Genghis Khan, would seek out shrines like this, call Kurultais, and then mysteriously come down with a case of arrow in the back. You know? Well, I guess the spirits decided you were not worthy. So it is not a risk-free endeavor, is my point, even if things went well. Bayan Monk completes the obeisances, and Mandukhai the Wise, as if to forestall any further possibility of fucking up, grabs his arm, and I like to imagine, hey, historical, holds it up like he was a heavyweight boxer, and sort of looks around to her political base and says, all right, great, 3 things. First, we are now engaged to be married. Second, I am regent until he is old enough to consummate. They apparently got along fairly well. They had 8 kids later. And third, we are now going to go and win some battles because words only get so much. And requisite amount of cheers from the audience. She had played this as well as you can play a very unstable situation. Mandukhai the Wise threw Bayan Monk in a box. A box, in this case, means that it's a basically Mongol version of a car seat, where you have legs cut in a square box and armholes. And you put the child who's too fragile or weak to ride over it, in it, and sling it over like a saddlebag. She goes, Mandukhai, and makes up with Unabolid, who signs on with her, which gives her more legitimacy, and rides to battle. Bayan Monk is dragged 2 physical battles at 7 in a box because it would be worse if he didn't show up in person. That would be a blow to his prestige and image that Mandukhai had worked so hard to create for him. Now, Mandukhai immediately has her people and army march on the Oirats to give a signal victory. Remember, military power consolidates your idea of you being a force on the steppes. And while the life of Mandukhai Sechem Khatun is long and varied, I think we'll close with this incident that shows how well she was thought of in her own time by her peers. Mandukhai apparently liked to get into the thick of things. The Mongols generally tended to prefer killing from a distance. Horse archers, you know, kind of hard to do it up close. So then you switch to swords, axes, whatever. And in the fray, Mandukhai Khatun is struck by an unfortunate blow. Not the most unfortunate blow, mind you. The most unfortunate blow would have killed her. The second most unfortunate blow would have killed her horse. She got the third one, which is her helmet gets torn off. That's not good. There are arrows and swords and knives everywhere. Yeah. But what's remarkable is an Oirat, who are the people she's here to fight, an Oirat captain basically does this. Time out, stop this, very silly. All right, looks like Mandukhai has lost her helmet. Anyone want to lend her yours? Well, if there's one thing that's universal in human nature, it is not liking to volunteer for things, because no one volunteers a helmet. I imagine the captain gives, after a moment, a very shitty look to his troops. I'm so disappointed in you. And then peels off his own helmet, hucks it over to Mandukhai, who swiftly puts it back on, and then the signal is given, "Time in! We can continue to kill each other like civilized people!" It says something about how well respected you are if your enemies are insisting that battles are played fair when you're a personal participant. I think that's where we're going to end today. Thank you.